welcome everybody. My name is Jay Garcia. I am co-founder of Modus Create. We're very excited to kick off the official summer season of the NoVaJS Meetup group. We've had quite a few months of not being able to talk to you guys due to various commitments that we had to take care of. But with the launch of Sencha Touch in action, it just seemed like just the right time to get re-engaged with the group. So thank you very much to Custom 8 for allowing us to use your space. A really cool space, and we hope we get an opportunity to use it again in the future. So the Wi-Fi credentials are up here. So if you want to connect, make sure you turn your BitTorrent clients off, please, and cell phones off too, please, because I don't want any distractions if possible. So the main purpose of this talk is just for me to kind of walk you through what Sencha Touch in action is, and give you some of the history, and walk you through some of the very, very cool stuff that I have lined up in the later chapters of the book. And after I'm done talking, I'm going to have a good friend of mine and Sencha employee Mitch, who is also a co-author of Sencha Touch in action, kind of walk you through some of his examples as well. So Modus Create is a company that I co-founded back in March 2011. And we've really focused on developing kick-ass applications for awesome clients. And we've been able to achieve that and experience extremely explosive growth. We went from 3 people in 2011 when we launched to over 20 people today. So if anyone's interested in potentially getting challenged in ways that you've never been challenged before, potentially, look us up. So how many people here have zero experience with Sencha Touch? Okay, so I promise not to make fun of you, okay? I'm just kidding. I will make fun of you. No, I'm just joking. So Sencha Touch is what I would consider the best mobile-centric HTML5 framework. It is not to be confused with something, or compared to even like something like JQ Mobile or JQ Touch, or any other mobile library out there. Sencha Touch does things that I feel that those libraries could potentially even dream of doing. It does provide a foundation to develop kick-ass cross-platform web applications, but it does require some discipline because you do have limited CPU, you do have limited memory, and so on and so forth. And it is built on the best web standards. Now, when I first started supporting Sencha Touch as a community member, they only really supported WebKit. And as of earlier this year with Sencha Touch 2.1, they finally supported Windows Phone 8, and with Sencha Touch 2.2, BlackBerry is now supported as well. So we are literally just working on a prototype for the BlackBerry Z10 using a mashup of Sencha Touch and Impact.js, and which will be talking to our instance of a server-side JavaScript framework called Silk.js to allow 2 players to play a game called Othello. So Sencha Touch itself has a very robust class inheritance model. Now, this robust class inheritance model actually requires some discipline on your side as a developer. So if you're used to developing JavaScript in ways that perhaps isn't OOP, well, jumping into the world of Sencha Touch is going to force you in there, because if you end up not using good practices, then you'll develop a project that'll work one day, and the moment you have to make a major change, it's going to take you days where it should have probably just taken hours. Sencha Touch is the only mobile HTML framework that actually provides what's called the full component lifecycle. So that is, if you go to do something like create a list, for example, you can expect that list to have an initialization phase, a render phase, or a destruction phase. And that all comes from the robust class inheritance model. That actually comes from a class called the abstract component class. Now, it uses an observable event model to allow you to listen to events on elements or classes, such as the data store or other components. Now, there's a container model class that allows you to have components manage other components and use the configurable layout managers to arrange your items on screen. And when you're ready to finally deploy your application, they have something called Sencha command, which allows you to package your application. Now, Sencha Touch has this amazing packaging capability that allows you to develop your application, compress, minify, essentially, and deploy that minified package. Now, when that minified package is loaded by the browser, it's cached in local storage. And every time that app is loaded thereafter, it's immediately bootstrapped. And the only thing that's requested from the server is maybe some data that you requested to bootstrap the application, and a delta file called app.json. Now, if you deploy a change, your app.json will change, and Sencha Touch will request the delta from the code and allow your user to perhaps request a refresh of the application, or defer the request, the update. But the idea is that every time you launch the application after the first load, you're going to get super fast load because it's coming from HTML5 local storage. So Sencha Touch in Action is a book that took, unfortunately, over 2 years to develop. It's a really sad story, but it actually makes a lot of sense once I explain it. Sencha Touch, we started to support 1.0, and after I deployed EXE.js in Action for EXE 3.0, I thought to myself, hell yeah, I'm going to write another book. And that really was an awesome decision and not so awesome at the same time. Because little did I know, about 6 to 7 months after we started Sencha Touch 1, and about 75% into it, Sencha decides to release Sencha Touch 2. So we decided, well, Sencha Touch 1 was awesome, but not so awesome in its own right. So Sencha Touch 2 we were super excited about, so we decided to just say, screw the stuff from Sencha Touch 1, we're going to start from the beginning, which brings us to today. So we literally were supposed to go to print 2 weeks ago, the past Tuesday. I'm really not happy to say that we haven't gone to print yet, and the reason is because Sencha Touch 2.2 came out. There were some breaking changes, but the good thing is that I've gone through the book, and we now cover Sencha Touch 2.2 completely. So that's really exciting. The bad thing is, I was literally hoping to have physical copies to hand to you guys today. So fail on me. So I've been asked a lot, who is this book for? And I would say anyone looking to develop mobile HTML5 apps with Sencha Touch. And when I say mobile HTML5 apps, I'm not thinking of something that has super 3D interactions and whatnot. I'm thinking of apps that are typically apps that you would use that don't require low-level API access that are extremely robust. I mean, you guys think this stuff does run in the browser. And I told folks, from the beginning, you have to understand JavaScript. Sencha Touch is very, very scope dependent. Okay, so if you don't understand a simple concept like context execution or scope, you're going to have trouble with Sencha Touch or anything Ajax for that matter. You have to be able to understand basics of HTML5 semantics, and lastly, CSS3. Okay, so there are certain things that you may want to do, like an awesome animation, and if you really don't understand CSS3, you're going to run into trouble. I'm that guy that didn't understand CSS3 when I started. I still don't understand CSS3. And luckily, I have a team of people that can help me. But my point is that you really have to understand it to do awesome things with it that go beyond what comes out of the box. That's a duplicate slide. Fantastic. So part 1 is mainly a bootstrapping part, just like any book. Walk you through what exactly is Sencha Touch, what it's not. What is it like to download the framework? Why is it so big? Where do you get the documentation from? Looking at the package contents, what are the different directories? And then in the second chapter, which is the end of part 1, I walk you through building a very basic application. Now part 2 is where it starts to get really hot. We look at the event system, okay? What is it like to use Sencha Touch to register an event in the DOM? What is it like to register events in the various classes? What is it like to deal with components? What is it like to deal with all the layouts? What's an HBox? What's a VBox? What is fit? What is the card layout? How do you manipulate those? And then we look at components, like what is literally the component class? What is container? What is list? What is panel? So on and so forth. And then we move to looking at things like data packages. How do you load a data store from Ajax? How do you load it from XML? And so on and so forth. Now, part 3 is where I had a lot of fun writing. It is the most complex. So we do cover things like object-oriented JavaScript from the ground up. And I mean little prototypal inheritance. What does that mean? What is the prototype object? Why is it that functions are treated like values and so on and so forth? And then we take a class that we developed and inherited from, and then we go and create that class using Sencha Touch. All right, everybody kick his butt. What is it like to develop the classes with Sencha Touch? And then what is it like to use the loader system? So one of the cool things that Sencha Touch provides is the ability to bootstrap your application and only have to include the very basic CSS and JavaScript stuff. That's it. You don't have to worry about much after that for development, because the class system is going to go, and the loader system is going to go ahead and load all the dependencies dynamically. And I'm going to walk you through some of the plugins that we developed as well, but I also walk you through what is it like to build an actual custom extension. What is it like to build a plugin from the framework? And then lastly, building an app, and then deploying it with Sencha command. So instead of kind of walking you through like a bunch of different examples, I wanted to just walk you through what is it like to build something that was really hard. Okay, I have this list item that I was able to create. I call him Actions List because I'm not very creative whatsoever. And this freaking plugin extension was part of the stuff that took me a few weeks to fix from Sencha Touch 2.0 to 2.1 and then 2.2. For every major release for Sencha Touch, I had to update this thing. So I don't know if this is going to work in 2.3. So I'm not touching it anymore for now. But the whole purpose of this is to allow you to use a horizontal swipe gesture and reveal actions underneath, right? You want to be able to thumbs up somebody or call them or maybe thumbs down or maybe flip them the bird or something. And it turns out this actually was really difficult, and it was the perfect type of problem to solve in the context of the book. So if you think about the type of stuff that needs to go on, you first think about, let me go back here. Okay, well, if we want someone to use a swipe gesture from left to right, does the framework actually provide something for that? The answer is yes, but it's not the swipe gesture that you're thinking. You have to think about, well, if the swipe gesture is just simply to swipe left and right, well, once I've taken my finger off the phone, I've lost control of that element. So how do we actually deal with it? So I thought about it. I was on a plane. I said, well, let me just try using the simple drag. And then I ran into problems. Well, if I were to drag left and right, that worked very well. But then I can scroll up and down as well. And I can do all types of crazy XY movements, and it just acted really funky. So I decided, okay, well, what would it be like to actually lock the scroller? How do I do that, and so on and so forth? So all of these problems were solved with this plugin. It was a lot of fun. We also had an interesting challenge with inheritance. So basically, the list class that you see representing the data here is the container instance, in essence, that renders all of the instance of list items. So each row is an instance of list item. And this is what the inheritance model looks like. So dataview.list extends ext.dataview.dataview, but it implements ext.dataview.list item, which also is a subclass of ext container. Well, in order to actually get this extension to work, I had to extend the list item itself. Then I also had to extend the list to implement the list item, which got to be a lot of fun.
Before you go to the question, so is this a browser? Is this running WebKit, or is this
Yeah.
running myself?
Yeah, I'll actually demo to you. Let me get on my personal Facebook feed. I apologize. Go back, I tell you. So this is in the browser, left to right.
So Sencha Touch will not build standalone applications.
Oh yeah, it will. Oh, you mean standalone as in packaged?
Outside of the browser.
It can. They today do support packaged applications, but it's not like building native Objective-C. What you're essentially doing is there's a wrapper that's created. It's kind of like what you do when you create add to home screen thing here. So I'll walk you through what this is. So in iOS, what he's doing basically is wrapping a WebView instance that points to the URL that the Safari instance pointed to, and essentially builds a native wrapper around it, gives you this full screen experience. So that's not a native app, but if you were to use this, you wouldn't be able to tell, right? Unless whatever. But with Sencha Touch, currently today, you can package your HTML5 apps in a native wrapper, but you're not developing in Objective-C or in Java.
Typically, you're deploying just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS.
Correct. Unless you're doing like custom plugins. We had this awesome challenge summer of last year where a customer says, well, for this one product we would like you guys to help us build, we want you to allow single sign-on. Turns out single sign-on was a big pain in the ass when it came to HTML. Well, mobile HTML. Because as a user, you would click a link or tap a link and it would bring you to a web page. So you'd have one redirect, and then it turns out that redirect sometimes would open the mobile Safari browser, not just the app instance or whatever, and getting back and forth was a big pain in the butt. So we solved that by wrapping the HTML5 app in PhoneGap, and we implemented custom instances of the child browser plugin for both Java and Objective-C. So what we did was we launched the app, and we detected that there was no login token present, and we slid up the single sign-on. And then we literally listened to every single communication that was being made by the browser, all the redirects, and we found out that the final redirect to the application was made, we intercepted that, closed the child browser, and then the background application made another AJAX request to verify login was good, and they had the welcome screen. So there are certain challenges you can overcome with a hybrid native application, but it all depends on what your objectives are to achieve that. So as I just said before, I had to think about these implementation challenges. Now, the swipe gesture I alluded to earlier. I'll walk you through actually what that's like to think about having to deal with that. I also had to think about what is it like to show and hide actions. Who is responsible for that stuff? Who is responsible from a class perspective? Now remember, we did have to create 2 extensions over here. Who is responsible for injecting the items into the DOM? Because Sencha Touch doesn't provide this out of the box. Where am I going to register the tab events? How am I going to deal with selection? If you think about the selection model, interaction model, where did we go? Let's open this guy back up. Should I allow someone to select an item, keep the item selected if I showed an action? Probably not, right? And if I were to select an item, should I leave the selected item, the actions available for people to use? Probably not. And then lastly, there was this locking of scroll, which had to be dealt with. So it turns out that in dealing with this, if the UX.ActionList item did most of the work. He was responsible for detecting the swipe gesture. Now remember, when I say swipe gesture, I'm not thinking of a simple left to right or right to left, flick of the finger. I'm talking about click and drag. So that is, I'm slowly clicking to reveal, and then I release. Okay, so you have 2 interaction models. There's the initial drag, and then there's the release. And then we had to think about the injection of the DOM. How do we know when to inject this HTML that represents the actions? And how do we know when to listen to items being tapped? And lastly, how do we know, if you keep your eyes trained in the background, not on the message that's appearing, how do we know to reanimate stuff back into view? Well, ActionList item takes care of that for us. And he ends up being the largest class and probably the most complicated extension I've had to do for Sencha Touch and have to write about. That was a lot of fun. So this is the way it works. So this block of code actually exists inside the list item class. And my element essentially points to this element, okay? So we're listening to the drag event and the drag element, end events. But we're only listening to those events on the elements whose class is x-list-item-inner. So with Sencha Touch, I can say, listen to these events, but only if they happen on this element with this specific CSS class. And at that point, when the drag event is fired for that element, then onDrag will be called as a method within the scope of the instance of the list item. And then when the drag end occurs, the drag end is when the user has implemented a drag event and has released it. Okay? So onDrag invokes this guy. Drag end invokes the rest of the animation. So that's just simply done on the element. Super low level, very easy to do. The management of the drag event, on the other hand, was a little bit more difficult. So I'm not going to walk you through each line of code here, but the idea here is that we need to figure out, is the drag occurring in the X or Y, left or right position? And we're going to go ahead at the very end, if we figured out that the delta has been 5 pixels or more, we're going to go ahead and fire what's a custom horizontal drag event. So you're seeing the very bottom line, the actual instance of list item is publishing an event that is a custom event that's actually being caught by the ActionList extension. So ActionList is going to listen to horizontal drag event, do some things like stopping the scroll from happening, right? So if I go to show you the implementation again, if I'm in the middle of drag, I should not be able to scroll up and down. I should only, because there are 2 conflicting user experience actions. So the ActionList implementation will listen to every list item's horizontal drag event and stop the scrolling from happening if the list item says that, hey, look, I have a horizontal drag event happening, I want you to stop. Then this was the beast. How do I actually show this stuff? And this is where I had to look at the CSS3 Safari reference to get this stuff done. So in essence, what I had to figure out was where in the XY positioning plane is the drag event occurring, and then I had to implement, if not, it has not been implemented, the actions template. So the way the class is designed, you set up actions as an extension, and he has a template array, which is an instance of exe template. So exe template is a way that you can express. Have you guys used Mustache.js before, or any other templating engine? Yeah, you use it, you jerk. So the templating engine basically allows you to express a string with certain tokens. And with exe.js, you can have all types of conditional parameters and so on and so forth. And we do that so we can have some HTML and get stuff represented via data. And it just gets merged. You have this HTML fragment. And in this one section where you see append, actions TPL.append, so actions TPL points to an instance of that X template. So I'm telling him to append it to that reference element called item.body. And actions actually points to an array of actions. So if I were to show you what an array of actions would look like, he'd look like, let's see, where are you? Right here. Look how simple that is. So we have our array of actions, we've appended it to the DOM, and we had to wrap an ext get, so we basically wrap an instance of ext element around it so we can manipulate him. And then we add some CSS3 transition stuff. And for every tick, so if you think about the drag event occurring, it's every cycle. Every time the X position has changed on that element, the drag event is firing, show actions is ultimately being executed, and the last line is where the magic happens. We're adding this WebKit transform, which essentially is adding whatever the move to X parameter is, moving the item on the X plane. So that is still working on this section here. So then we had to think about cleanup. This is funny. I skipped a step. Yes.
Question: does the browser limit how many events can be fired per second, per millisecond, anything like that?
I have not even begun to dive into that. I imagine there's some cap somewhere.
Because I would think executing that big section of code every, pixel is going to take some horsepower.
You'd be surprised. So one of the hidden truths is that the V8 engine, or Nitro in iOS, V8 is going to be in the Chrome instances, it's actually really fast. I mean, ridiculously fast. And the old adage of the DOM is still the slow part is still true. So the slowness that people experience when it comes to these mobile HTML5 apps mostly has not to do with JavaScript, but has to do with the DOM. And this is where doing things in a very efficient manner from the ground up becomes imperative to get your application, moving the right way. And we've had friction. Right. Like one day we decided to implement a Sencha Touch list, and we were like, dude, why is this taking so long to load? And we saw all this DOM that Sencha Touch was adding that we never needed. So we said, screw that. We're going to use an X template, and we used an X template in a container, and we had super lightweight DOM, and it was like 10 times faster. So you pick and choose what your poison is. And here it makes sense to implement a list because you may want that super alpha index or what they call the disclosure icon or grouping or so on.
Are you destroying your views after you use them?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. In fact, that's part of the cleanup mechanism right here. So where are we? That is. Oh, I skipped this slide. That's fantastic. Let's look at hide, and I will show you the cleanup stuff real quick. So this was a lot of fun. So hide occurs when you've either selected a row that is not the action row, or if you clicked an action, or if you did the stride to scroll up and down. And the thing we have to think about is what is going to happen after the element has the top element has slid into view. How do we deal with the after event, right? And we do that by hooking into the WebKit transition end event on the element. So if you've appended or added a listener to an element through CSS, then when the event, the animation finishes, you want to be able to remove that listener. Okay, so you're saying, you may animate again. I only want to know for this one time that we're going to go ahead and deal with the animation end. And that's what this little guy, the transition listener, is going to do. he's going to go ahead and remove event listener, and I kind of truncated this out because it's a long JavaScript sentence that would have made the text really small. But I go ahead and remove this CSS class called the opaque list item. So essentially the way it works is the list item, if you were to inject DOM underneath the current list item, the list item is transparent. So you see the text bleed right through underneath, and you would see icon meshed underneath the text. And that was really ugly. So when we showed the list item, I injected this this property, this CSS class that basically makes it opaque, does not allow transparent stuff to go through. So this clear actions EL is basically going to deal with some of our cleanup. So let me pull up the actual fully baked code. And I missed the on drag end part, so I'm going to walk you through that really quickly.
Jay, what is the syntax of this full colon? I've never seen it before.
I'm sorry, so what now?
What is the full colon syntax? What's the
Full colon syntax? Where do you see that?
on drag command?
Oh, this guy?
Yeah.
This is when you're defining an object. So what you're looking at essentially is me not cleaning up in preparation for the presentation. So this is me defining a class. Okay, so the way it works is you go to define an exe class or a Sencha Touch class, and you express your class namespace through a string, and the second parameter is going to be an object that's going to be used to direct the framework to figure out which class he's going to extend. So ext.ux.actionList extends ext.dataview.component.listItem. That's a freaking long mouthful. And then I give him this xtype, which is a shortcut property. Allows me to create instances using basically a nickname instead of this long, ext.ux.actionListItem. There's this block called a config block. This is known as the prototypal config block. It basically allows you to set up properties for the instances of the classes that get created, and automatic setters and getters are applied. So I can set up a Boolean, and now I have API access that's automatically generated by the framework. It's a pretty cool setup. So this actions TPL essentially is an array that gets concatenated into a string for us. And so the way it works is you go to set a property, the setter method that's automatically generated for you gets called, and then the applier gets called thereafter. Now the applier is very much like a factory, and that's what we're using them here for. So apply actions TPL will automatically be called when this property is set. And we use this pattern because it allows us to know that when the applier is called, that this class has already been defined, this class has been defined, and we can always expect that EXEX template will be defined for us. If we were to set this up as a new EXEX template at this step, we're never guaranteed at the point that the JavaScript interpreter is digesting this blob of code that the X template class is in memory at that point. So we use the applier property or a pattern to know just in time that something can be created when the class is instantiated. So onDragEnd is a method that is called when you let go of the element. So that is, you're initiating a drag and you let them go. And the fun part here is when we do the WebKit transform. So we figured out where we were going left or right and how many pixels we have left to go to make the transition occur. And we do that by basically adding this translate 3D property to this WebKit transform style. And that's what gives us this little, kind of snapping away. So you can go either left or right, and then he takes care of that for us. And then we delete some properties just to clean stuff up that we just don't need anymore. Now, do you need to do this? Probably not. I mean, you could decide to set some of these Booleans as false, but why create another data property if you can just simply delete it and set that key to undefined? Anyway, so hide actions, again, is responsible for simply hiding the actions. So animating this guy back into place and then removing him from the DOM. That's what he's responsible for. And again, like I said, we have this callback, and then he's going to go ahead and worry about removing the transition listener. So we have this lexicoscope reference here, and we use remove listener on the elements, which is the item text ELCT DOM. Yes, I got really ridiculous with some of these. But the point is that he does some cleanup, and then he goes ahead and destroys the action elements. So this is where we're actually telling the framework, we don't really need this DOM anymore. Go ahead and pull them out of memory. And at that point, I'm clearing up some resources by telling this instance of the list action item class, hey look, you don't have to worry about this reference DOM element. You may never see him again. And if you do need him, then the show actions class will create a new element for you and pop him in the DOM. So what we're doing is we're guaranteeing that for the lifetime of this list in the application that we are just in time injecting the DOM, and when it's no longer needed, we're popping it away. Now, I've actually toyed with the fact, or the idea of saying, well, if I created it once, why can't I just move him up and down? Well, the reality is that if I were to slide something over, I mean, it's a little hard to see, but at one point in time, I actually have 2 instances of this little actions element in memory, in the DOM. So that cleanup code would have gotten really disgusting, and I decided not to do that. So it was a lot simpler to do this, and we got it done. Any questions on this? I know it's like super complex, and it's really warm in here. So, and I'm sure the insulin shock doesn't help. Yes?
Is IntelliJ just your personal ID or is there like a couple in there?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story.
Okay.
A long time ago, Tuesday, I decided to try Sublime Text and see if it could do what I needed to do. And I tried it half day Tuesday, and I tried all day Wednesday, and I tried to do all day today. By midday, I had it. There is just certain things with IDEA that I just love from a JavaScript perspective. There are lots of things about Sublime Text that I love, but there are too many things that I need to set up and configure and customize. So yes, I use IDEA, and it is a freaking beast. It is Java. It is fat. It is bloated. But in the end, in the end, yeah, dude, I tested out Eclipse, Komodo, a 10, and a bunch of things like in 2008, and IDEA was the thing. It was out of the box, it just worked, and it was fantastic. Yes.
Don't they also make web storage?
They do, yes. Yeah, being that I jumped from project to project, I never know if I have to support a Java project, so I use IDEA. Yes.
Is there an EXT.js package for this, or there is?
No, there is for, no, I think it's for
Eclipse.
Eclipse. Not for IDEA though, right?
Right.
No. There's one for Eclipse. So the way this works is it'll actually digest and parse all of your JavaScript. And that means if you have the EXT.js stuff inside your project, which I do here, it will digest it as well. So it does do IntelliSense like ext.get. There we go. So, it does help quite a bit. And what it actually does is it parses the JS doc style documentation that's in the framework. You're never guaranteed for stuff to work, but it's pretty good. And I love it because it helps with my own code. Like this.hide, there we go. Fantastic. One thing that I really love about it, if I wanted to go look at a class, I can command click on it, and it's going to be listed in a few different places, but I can choose the file. There we go. And open the Sencha Touch source file, and even my own code, just by simply command clicking on the actual.
Does it come loaded, or you have to?
No, it did it for me automatically. It's freaking fantastic. Watch this. Watch. Yeah, it's fantastic. If I want to refactor this to config, done. I didn't have to change anything. I just had to run a keystroke. This is not meant to be a sales call or an advertising for IDEA. But my point is that I'm trying to be very, very open and try other stuff like Sublime Text too. I'm trying to love it. But for what I have to do right now, it's just way too much friction. So I'm going to try again after Sencha. Any other questions? No? Awesome. Cool beans. So, learning resources for learning. Obviously, we have Sencha Touch in Action available, but we are actually also working on video training series for Sencha Touch. So if you're interested about learning about what we're doing, please go ahead and sign up, moduscreate.com/training/video. We do have a teaser kind of giving you certain samples from each of our developers, and we're open for folks to joining our beta program and giving us feedback, so feel free to sign up and learn more. And contact info, I'm at ModusJesus on Twitters, j@moduscreate.com, and if you want to get a copy of of EXT.js in Action, I was also supposed to get you guys some promo codes to get you like 50% off, but certain company who will not be named that helped publish this book was not responsive. So, sorry. But as soon as we get that stuff, we'll go ahead and post on the Meetup. So thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.